Welcome back to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast. My name's James Lloyd,
And my name is Steve Smith.
and we're both alcohol free performance coaches.
We are
What's that all
indeed.
about, Steve? What the hell does an alcohol free performance coach do? I've never even heard of that.
So what we do is we walk around in the woods all day long, taking videos and posting them on Instagram.
Whoa, I wonder where you were going with that for a minute.
No, not at all. Not at all. That is not what we're all about, although it feels like it some of the
Well, that's
time.
pretty much my full time job, if I'm
So,
honest
well, it
with
certainly is. It certainly is. No, so yeah, joking aside for a moment. Yeah, well,
you.
we
You've got
help.
no idea what you do, you
I've got
basically
no
do.
idea. We absolutely help people to become their best selves when they take an extended break from alcohol and see what life is like on the fun side of the island.
That
How
sounds
does
like one
that
of your,
sound?
that sounds like one of your videos, to be quite honest. Oh, good stuff. Yeah, so
Uh,
we've been alcohol free for, well, spoiler alert, it's coming up to a big anniversary for you, right, Steve?
it is the 27th of June this year. Not that I don't date check all the time, but I do know the day that I stopped. And the 27th of June this year will be 5 years alcohol free for me, which
5 years.
absolutely blows my freaking mind. I can't believe 5 years is coming up. Yeah,
That's incredible.
I
I'm a
know.
few months behind you.
Yeah,
I'll be 5. I'll be five on the 1st of September.
right.
It's yeah, it's good. It's crazy. I mean, I feel like we should have a fifth birthday party this year. Maybe we could have like a shared birthday party in like July or June or August
We
or
should,
something like that.
we could do it like an actual fifth birthday party and do pass the parcel and have
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
silly games, or maybe not.
Sounds great.
But yeah, it's coming up and just yeah blows my mind really. But it's amazing. Yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world. And looking forward to what the next 5 years bring.
Mm.
Yeah. So
And I guess building up to your big your big five. I was going to say
yeah,
5-0, but obviously you passed 5-0 a long
well
time
gone
ago.
that one.
So you know, now we're building up to the big five. So I think today's episode we're going to talk a little bit about what's happened along those 5 years, how the adventures kind of rolled out for you and for me.
Yeah, I think just kind of we often talk about in the early stages and what it looks like and all the things like dry January and sober October and what does the first month look like and everything else. And yes, we've had guests on the podcast that have been alcohol free for a long time and we've talked about things in a little bit more depth. But I think one of the first things when you decide to go alcohol free, one of the first things that really holds people back is that question of what does it look like long term? What does it look
Mm,
like? The thought of saying I'm not going to drink again, and why is that important? Do we need to say that? Because actually, I could probably count twice the times I've ever said that. I know it,
mm,
but it's kind of just been organic and it's grown into that, and it's not. I think if we start off with that in mind, or we start thinking, what does 3 months look like? Oh my God, how am I going to do Christmas next year, or how am I going to do this? Then it just becomes far too much to focus on. So I thought it might be just
mm.
nice just to kind of chat about how that journey has
Yeah.
been
So,
for you and us.
do you know what? You got me thinking about that now because that was kind of quite what you've just described there is kind of what I advise all of my clients to do. Is never say never.
Mm,
Never say I'm never drinking again or this is forever because it is. You're right. It's too completely overwhelming. It's too big, and it's just so hard to wrap your head around. And I've had clients who've done that prior to me working with them, where they've gone into it like that, and it's just derailed them because it's just too scary. But for me, actually, it wasn't like that. Um, was shooting for forever but I'd kind of build up to it over kind of quite a gradual period where I kind of stop start. I've done a month, I've spoken about it quite a few times before. I did like a month and then 2 months and then 3 months and it kept just going around in this loop of like kind of seasonal dieting almost where I'd take the winter off and then drink like a mad bastard over the summer and
mm,
then after Christmas drink like crazy again and then take off January to April. But my intention was always to try and make it permanent. Not initially. I think when I first started going in, what I was just describing there, but basically it was over about an 8 year period. So
mm,
I first took 4 months off when I was 38 after I read Alan Carr's How to Control Alcohol, and I had this moment of spontaneous sobriety. But then it all kind of started to creep back in after 4 months, and then I kind of couldn't get back to this idea of never drinking again, which I really wanted because
mm,
after I'd done it with Alan Carr, I was kind of, oh my God, I'm never going to drink again. This is fantastic, and I
mm,
couldn't get it back. So I was almost always trying to get back to that place where I wanted to be alcohol free for good. But I don't personally recommend that other people do that, because if you're just easing your way into it, again, saying never is really, really difficult to deal
Mm,
with.
mm.
So I think it's different for different people. But tell me about how it was with you.
Yeah, so it was the opposite for me. So I had taken breaks, and I think the longest I'd done prior to stopping was, I think, just under 2 months. Um, and actually, that was really interesting because I had stopped for dry January, and I had started to see some real benefits, and I had decided to keep it a little bit longer. But the old fade-in effect bias kicked in, and I started to convince myself that things were probably never going to be, I could go back and just have a glass of wine or a beer at the weekend, and it would all be fine.
Mm.
Um, but when I decided to, when I stopped on the 27th of June 5 years ago, um, it was going to be 3 months initially, and I think, oh, well, I've said this a number of times before. I stopped to train for Ironman UK, and that was my target, and I knew that was a year away. That was pretty much 1 year away, almost to the week. And I think in the back of my mind, I was thinking, could I go a year? But that's when I really started to stumble across podcasts, Quit Lit, audiobooks, and just started to listen to all of that. And it was really quite quick that I noticed the gains. And we often talk about the gains that everybody gets in the first month and what have you. I noticed it really, really quickly. I noticed it most and first and foremost in my fitness and in my weight loss. Um, and something happened. I went out, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks in, and there's a charity bike ride near us. It's not a race by any means. Um, but it felt like a race to me because it was a challenge. It was 75 miles. It was an easy feat, very hilly kind of 75 miles. I went out and I was actually the second guy to cross the line, and I was like, shit, what's just happened? Now don't get me wrong, there are no one's really racing it, but the front 10 guys are probably going out with an expectation to get around in a certain time. So it kind of blew my mind. So that kind of set the ball rolling, and I kind of
Mm.
continued it. The training got better. That went to 6 months, and I thought, let's just get through Christmas. Let's just get through Christmas and see how that goes. Christmas came, New Year came. I felt good. Had a great New Year. Talked about that before, getting up dancing in the kitchen after a few alcohol-free beers, realizing that nobody gave a shit what I was doing. And then my birthday came and went, and that was my 49th, my 48th actually, sorry. And I thought, wow, nearly there now. I'm kind of moving towards this big date in early July when I'm doing Ironman. And I'd signed up to do a half Ironman in the May, so I thought I'll get to that. So there was all these firsts, you know what I mean? And there were holidays away, and we took a holiday to Mallorca, and I was like, well, I've always wanted to hire a road bike and do some of the most beautiful cycling in Mallorca because it's insane. And that kind of turned that holiday into something much more fitness based. So we did that. I did that, and then by that stage, I was on a roll, but there was no point on it where I was going, oh, what does this look like? I hadn't even thought about beyond that year. And then the first year I got to Ironman UK, I did it on, I think it was about the 13th of July or something. So it was a couple of weeks over a year, finished it. And I thought when I was approaching it that it would get to the stage where I went, oh, well, I've done it now. And it didn't happen. And I think that was because I just filled my head with so much positive stuff, so
Yeah.
many podcasts, so much. I mean, I was massively listening to the OTI podcast at that time. I was like weekly listening to that every single week, and it massively helped. So that kind of built the first year, and then it kind of moved on from there. But how did your first year pan out?
Well, yeah. Well, the first year was kind of weird for me because, like I said, I read How to Control Alcohol by Alan Carr, which I read going on holiday because I didn't want to quit drinking altogether, but I'd recognized at 38 that something wasn't quite right, and that
Mm.
maybe I need to start dialing this down a little bit. So the idea of control appealed to me. And then I read the book, and it just completely, literally rewired my brain, almost, well, in the space of a book. And by the end of it, I was just like, oh my God, I'm not going to drink again. This is incredible. And it really was this case of sort of spontaneous sobriety. And it was kind of weird to me. I was a bit like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting this, but I kind of went along with it. And yeah, everything was pretty good for a few months. But the bit that I didn't do was I didn't. I felt all of the, I felt fantastic, just like you were saying a moment ago, which I think most people do in that first month. It's just this overwhelming feeling of, oh my God, I feel fantastic. If you've never taken a proper break before, then it's overwhelming how good it feels if you're focusing on it correctly. So I felt that, but there's two parts to it, I think, and this is partly what I do with clients as well. Is you get people to focus on all the great stuff that's happening, but you also have to address the feeling of loss about alcohol and really dig into, okay, what are all those benefits that you really think that you're getting? And that's the bit that I hadn't done from reading that book, I don't think. So there still was a sense of missing out on something, and that's the bit that really kept me in a loop for the following 8 years. Because the
Mm,
bit that I just couldn't get past was sport. And I've talked about this quite a few times before. Is that I just all of my my main friends, the friends you have for life, and we've probably got about three or four of them. I think most people probably have, and that's definitely true for me. And those friends for me were all linked to sport. They're all linked to all day drinking around sport, and I just couldn't get my head around how I'd be able to go to football or go to the rugby or build a weekend with my friends without booze being in it. Because I don't know if it's the same for you, but my friends don't live near me, so when I see my best friends, it's a weekend. We'll go.
mm,
They don't live around the corner. They live.
mm,
I've got two that live in Bournemouth, one who lives up in York, another one in Doncaster. So you have to plan a weekend, and that's
mm,
generally for me that was always built around sport.
mm,
And I just thought, what are we going to do? Like go and do yoga together or something, or go to a spa? I mean, I love going to spas now, but at the time, I couldn't wrap my head around how weekends watching sport with my best friends were going to work, and that was the thing that kind of kept me stuck. I just couldn't get over that
mm,
until it got to the stage eventually where I was like, well, I'm doing this, and I'm just going to have to figure it out as I go. And then I started to have these weekends where alcohol wasn't in the picture. And I realized it doesn't actually make a fuck of difference. And actually, things are a lot better. I feel great. I feel energized. I'm having, connecting with my friends, feeling really good, remembering it the day afterwards. And I
mm,
realized that it was just a limiting belief that I've been telling myself all those years. And the alcohol wasn't the most important um, element to the weekend. It was the friendship and the connections, and actually the sport was secondary to it as well. It was just spending quality time with people that you love, and
mm.
that's the bit that really I hadn't really anticipated. I thought we needed something to anchor the whole thing too, which for
Yeah,
me was drinking and sport. And I just realized, having done it, that it's not true. It's a limiting belief. It's not true.
yeah, yeah. I quickly noticed in terms of being in the pub, and I think there was, I'm similar thing. A lot of my friends are kind of further away, but there was a moment I met up with a couple of my like oldest mates, and I was in the pub. Now, granted, I would have had to have driven because I was meeting up after work, and it was in London. But we got to this pub, and I spent the entire evening in there with them. I wasn't drinking, but I just got this realization of how much more. So I suddenly started to feel so much more present in the moment, and actually realizing that I wasn't constantly thinking about where my next beer was coming from, and that was like that in itself was gave me a much better connection in that moment, and actually just and I've come back to it time and time again. It often is a trade-off because sitting in a pub sometimes can feel like a pointless exercise if that's the only reason you were going. But when you're with your kind of best mates and what have you, and that conversation's flowing and everything else, and you're having a great night, and if when that happens and you're more present in that moment, it's undeniably better. And that was kind of that shift for me. But it was, yeah, I just think it was creeping. It all just kind of crept up. Things kind of started to slot into place. Things started to feel a little bit better and or a lot better. Um,
So can you
until
identify a moment when you actually just, because you said it earlier on there that you were never planning, you just you did the Ironman, you got to then and you're like, oh, what now? Is there a point where you all of a sudden decided, that's it, I am done for good, I'm not drinking again?
I think so two things. I think the first, even before I got to Iron Man, the first moment that I actually thought there's really something in this, that when I genuinely felt I could do this for a lot longer if I
I
wanted
could
to,
do
was
this for
that
a living. Yeah. I can start a
I just
podcast about this.
I just grabbed my phone out. I was like, "Hi." No, was that New Year, that first New Year I went to. And now, don't get me wrong, I was drinking alcohol-free beers like plus, like they were a band-aid for me. I think I took a case to this party, and I was at the point where I was a bit sick of them. But it was that moment where I just remember everyone was hammered. And it was just at someone's house, lovely house, massive, massive, massive kitchen, diner, and everyone just up dancing before the bells at 12 o'clock. And I was like, right. And I just looked around and went, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to dance. And I actually, within about 2 minutes, was loving it. And everyone was super impressed, the sober guys dancing, and or maybe they weren't even thinking about it. But I just, that was that next morning when I woke up. And sorry, Joe, if you're listening, that morning she was hanging. She was absolutely hanging. And I dragged Joe and the kids down to the coast, and we went swimming in the sea on New Year's Day and everything else. And that's when I thought, and there's something about New Year for me. New Year sober, I just think it's like, and I just felt, maybe this is time for a new start. Maybe this is time for something a little bit different. But I don't think the moment came. There wasn't actually a moment where I just went, "This is it forever for me." Because I moved into year two, and I think when I moved into year two, that's when the seed started to sow about maybe I'd like to kind of help other people to do this. Maybe I'd like to see what life might look like outside of what I do generally. Maybe whether it's in the sporting endeavors and looking for something a bigger challenge to do or something to push myself even more. And we talked about this on the call, the community call this week. I do the things I do outside of my work, and I do all these challenges that I do because alcohol's taught me that I can do. Giving up alcohol's taught me that I can do hard things.
Mm.
So it's helped me to really focus on that and challenge myself. So I just kept feeding myself with these bigger, stupider challenges, which then made me feel just amazing, gave me so much more resilience in what I did. So it was kind of, they fed off each other. And that's when I
Mm.
started thinking, oh, who's this guy that coaches people around this? That sounds great to me. That sounds, what a fantastic thing to do for a living. What an amazing, and I would wonder if I could do that. And that's when and then that kind of took over. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't so much
Yeah.
focus about not drinking. It was about, well, okay, what kind of life could I build now? What does this look like differently? We're having a big extension on the house, and I'm not worried about money. I'm not concerned about it. I was going through, you know, some troubling times. My dad was sick, and there was all that, and I was tackling these kind of things very clear-headed, and I'm like, this is so
Oh,
much. This is just better. This is just better, and I just want to continue with this, and that's kind of all the way through that, and I've never said that's it
I'm
forever.
never
I mean,
drinking again.
it'd be pretty stupid if I started now. I'm not going to lie. When you build your entire career around it, and we do a weekly podcast on it,
That does rather lock it in,
it
doesn't
does rather lock it in. You know what? When I'm 85 and I'm sitting in my rocking chair in the home, I don't know.
I think
I
part of it
don't
though
see
is
it happening, but I don't know.
I kind of look at it almost a bit like it's like gravity in a way. The further away you get away, the further you move away from the big the big rock in the middle that's kind of pulling you in, the more the gravity kind of weakens and the more natural and easier it becomes to the point where there isn't any gravity at all, and I'm not explaining this very well, but the pull of it just kind of gets less and less and less with time. Time does heal all wounds, I guess, is one way of looking at it. But you just don't, every single day the habit kind of gets a bit more weakened, and you just don't feel it in the way that um, you did initially.
Mm, no, I'd agree. I'd agree. So yeah, I mean, again, same thing kind of back to you. How where did that kind of shift happen for you? I know you said that it was always going to be forever, but
Well,
did
I
they
kind of
start to
wanted it to
creep
be,
in or?
I wanted it to be forever, but I just couldn't seem to get it there.
Mm,
But for me, this is when my mum passed away. Is when I decided, right, this is
mm,
this is it. I'm locking it in for good now. And part of the thing that kind of kept me going with it was I got to a certain stage. I think where I'd got to, I think 3 months in, and I was feeling great, and I just did not want to sort of trade that again. And because I'd got to myself to a position where I felt that I was in a good place with it, I just didn't want to undo it all again. Because after when I was saying about it with Alan Carr, um, I kind of felt like I'd got to where I wanted to be, but then I lost it and I started drinking again, and I just couldn't get back to where I was before.
mm,
Um, but once I'd got to that stage again, having read sort of more books like Alcohol Explained and This Naked Mind, that it got me to the place where I wanted to be, and and that from that point on, I was like, no, I'm sticking with this. I'm not going to undo this all again. I'm going to keep going. And then it just started to, like I say, it just started to the pull of it started to weaken every
Mm,
single day, week after week, to the point where probably it didn't really probably take that long. Maybe after about 6 months, I was a bit like, this is it now.
mm,
This is
mm,
me. And to your point as well, it started to unlock so many other things in terms of what you were saying about once you've done something that you perceive to be quite hard, like quit drinking, all of a sudden you're like, okay, what's next? What am I going to do now? What am I capable of now that I didn't think I was capable of? And then I kind of turned to exercise and started working on that and nutrition and all of these health things kind of just cascaded down from the alcohol being removed. And but I started where I used to work. I used to work at Nintendo, which has got kind of quite like a young um, kind of the workforce is quite young. They're all in their sort of 20s and 30s. So I was one of the older people there, at 50. And I started to help people quite a lot with kind of advice around nutrition and alcohol and things like that. People were asking me, I wasn't sort of,
mm.
pushing my opinion on people. People were just generally asking me. And a friend of mine there sort of said to me, why don't you do some sort of coaching with people like with nutrition? Because when that was the next really big thing for me. When I quit drinking, I got massively into nutrition. I read a stack of books on diet and exercise and nutrition. I really got into nutrition. And a friend of
I
mine
know
said,
that because I've shared a car with you, and
I know, and I
I know
bored
what
you
your
half to
car
death.
snacks look like.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You don't have a, you're not like my car
No,
when you've got all the side panels are full of Haribo and chocolate. No, you're
no,
like,
no.
yeah,
I
yeah,
take like organic beef and things like that, as you actually saw. Yeah, I take good food with me everywhere. I'm really obsessive about
yeah.
what I eat. And I got really into nutrition. I learned all about it, and it just I don't know. I think maybe I'm a little bit ADHD. I've never been diagnosed with it, but I think maybe I've got a little bit of that in me. In that once I sort of get into something, I just go completely crazy and just consume as much as I can and learn as much as I can about it. And
Mm,
that's what came after for me was nutrition.
mm,
And anyway, so somebody said to me at work, "Why don't you, why don't you, you're always giving me advice about what to eat." And when she was asking, and why don't you sort of coach people around nutrition? And that was what I initially thought I was going to do, because I was getting to my late 40s, and I was starting to have thoughts about what am I going to do for the second half of my career and my life, and I started to thinking about wanting to help people. Um, but for about 3 months, I was thinking, right, I'm going to do something with nutrition, and I came to the conclusion that it was too much of a kind of um, there was too many other people doing it, and they all had dietary degrees and all this kind of stuff, and I didn't. I thought, meh. And then it suddenly popped in my head, alcohol. I was about 3 years in alcohol free by that point, and I thought hardly anyone doesn't drink anymore. Why don't I focus on that? Why don't I help people with alcohol? And it kind of came out of that really, and then I started, that's where we met. Of course, when we trained to become coaches, and then it all just kind of went from there. Really, I just started working with people almost immediately, and haven't stopped. I've always had clients for the last sort of year and a half, 2 years, and I just love it. I absolutely
mm,
love it because
mm,
there's nothing that kind of lights me up more than when people feed back to you that they've changed their relationship with alcohol, they're loving life, everything's fantastic, and they didn't think they'd be able to do it. And that's down to them. But sometimes people just need a little bit of signposting and a little bit of guidance, and dare I say it, a bit of hand holding. And you know, I don't know. Maybe you won't thank me for saying this, but I honestly believe the more people I coach, I just don't think quitting alcohol is as difficult as everyone makes it out to be. I really don't.
Yeah, I, yes. I mean, every situation is different. Of course it is. I totally get that. And we typically don't deal with people that are in severe crisis,
No.
but when we look at that, and I think, I put something out today on my social media, and it was somebody I've been working with recently, and they're 7 weeks alcohol free. And I don't think we've talked about alcohol for the last 3 weeks. It's just
So
it's irrelevant. It's just become irrelevant because what's become more relevant is them growing, is them expanding themselves at work, and really showing up at work, and really showing up for their families, and dealing with the simplest of things that would have just tipped someone over the edge at home. They're just surprising themselves every day that actually they're not flying off the handle, or
mm,
whatever it happens to be. And I think that for me is where what I love most about it. It's seeing people completely grow and change. And when you see people, when there's a week between it, it's like you get a snapshot each week. So it's not like
yeah,
you're seeing them
yeah,
every
yeah.
day and you don't see the gradual change. You see things every single week. And sometimes that shift in a week can be so dramatic. it can
Mm.
be so dramatic, or sometimes it can be that little bit more subtle, but it's those little pearls of wisdom that come up that you just think, yeah, that's it. That's I remember that.
I, I think when I sort of say, "Oh yeah, it's not as difficult as it sounds," and you could probably rewind the tape and go, "Well, hang on a minute, you told me it took you 8 years." Doesn't sound that easy. But I
Mm,
think when you have a system and a structure and a process,
mm,
it is kind of quite quick to navigate it, because fundamentally alcohol only stays in your system for about 5 days, right, for
yeah,
most people. So that is the only period of time where there's any kind of physical withdrawal whatsoever. After that first week, it's entirely psychological. So it's all about the stories we tell ourselves about alcohol. It's all about the beliefs. I feel like I'm coaching you here. I'm sure you said this to your clients, but it's true. If you can help people to kind of unpick their subconscious beliefs about alcohol, they've been built up for 20, 30, 40 years,
mm,
like we all had, like the limiting belief that I had, that I couldn't go to football and it would, I wouldn't have a social life and it'd be rubbish. It took me years upon years upon years to get over that, until I actually tried it and I questioned it and realized, actually, that's not true. All of that
mm,
shit that I've been telling myself is actually not true. And that's, I think, where coaching makes such a big difference, is because you can help to massively expedite that for people. So you can signpost them on, okay, but here's the thing, it's really difficult to do that on your own. When it's just you in your own head and you're going through the same patterns over and over again, just like I did with the whole, the sport thing, it's really difficult to kind of break out of that and see it for what it is. And,
mm,
there's not an episode that goes by where we don't say, when you're inside the jar, you can't read the label, but that's what
mm,
it's all about. That really is what's
exactly.
about. You can't, it's really hard to make an honest assessment of yourself and what's going on in your mind around alcohol. You need somebody to hold a mirror up to you and go, is this really what you think it is?
Mm,
Because the way I see it and the evidence that I can see from what you told me isn't that. It's something different. And
mm,
that's when people have that light bulb moment. They're like, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. And then
yeah,
you can see the cogs start to move and the perception of what's really happening starts to change, and you start to see things for what they really are.
yeah.
And that's the bit that I love about it. That's the bit I love about working with people. And that can happen so quickly. That can happen
It,
within a
it
couple of weeks.
it really can, and we're in the early stages. And again, I appreciate we've kind of moved on to coaching a little bit here, but you'll be aware of in the early stages where we get people to kind of weigh up on a metaphorical seesaw, so to speak, about what they're gaining, what they're losing, what they're, and everything else, and the
Mm,
balance there. Coming back to my story, and I'm guessing pretty much your story as well. I now look at that. I mean, it's not even a seesaw anymore. There's so much stuff piled onto one side, on a positive side of things, that actually the thought of actually giving up any of that just outweighs anything that
mm,
even the best night out on alcohol could give me. Do you know what I mean? It
mm,
just completely outweighs it, to the point where I think, why on earth would I? Now, that's not to say that 20, 30 years from now that life may have changed, and but I don't think like that. I don't think forward to that. I don't want to. That doesn't. I live for the now, and I want the second half of my life to be the very best it can be, and that's what this decision is serving me.
mm. Yeah, I agree. I just
Mm,
think, fundamentally, if when you look at the benefits versus um, the benefits of stopping versus the benefits of continuing,
mm,
I've started to sort of think a lot more recently that a lot of the benefits of stopping that you get, most of them come downstream of sleep, apart from like the financial benefits. But most of the health related benefits and the stress related benefits and energy and all these things, they're all to do with sleep. They're not really that. Once you get the sleep bit cracked, everything else from there just kind of cascades down.
mm,
So that's the bit I think that people tend to miss as well, is that there's always this idea that I just need to cut down a little bit. But when you're cutting down and you're still having even a small amount of alcohol, it's still trashing your sleep. So you
mm,
are missing out on all of those other benefits, because
mm.
that lack of REM sleep that the REM sleep that you miss out on from that glass of wine or those couple of beers, and you think, well, it's only a couple of beers, it can't be all that bad. That's the bit that people miss, because it is still trashing your sleep. Even if you don't think it is, you're still getting low quality sleep, and then you're more stressed, you're more tired, your mood's different, you're craving carbs rather than nutritious food, you're not performing in terms of exercise, your focus is off at work, and that's just from those couple of beers or that one glass of wine. But
Yeah, yeah.
people get stuck in the situation of, well, I just need to cut down. But it's, to be honest, the difference between drinking two beers a night to six beers a night, I actually don't think in that regard of what I've just explained that it makes that much difference. I really don't.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back to something because it's quite a hot topic at the moment. I don't know if you've seen. There's been a lot of bouncing back of something that Stephen Bartlett said last week. Have you seen that on
No.
social media at the
Oh,
moment?
Millie
And
Geach shared this, didn't she?
yeah, and I'm gonna push back because we have never been about coming on and preaching that you shouldn't drink on here. Never have been. And a lot of people are pushing back on his comment, and I actually do
What did he
agree with
say?
them. So what he said was, it was a part. He was basically saying, I had 3 glasses of wine. He's gone alcohol free for some time now, and he said I had 3 glasses of wine, and it ruined my life. So the next
That's just
3 days,
clickbait, though, isn't it?
but yeah, of course. But then when he started describing what he described as ruining his life, he's like, I didn't sleep properly, so I didn't get to the gym the next day, and I couldn't podcast properly, and all these things. So, well, okay, that's your life has not been ruined, and I think, we're not here to preach you should never drink. Obviously, drinking on a regular basis impacts these things, but there's some pushback on this is the fact that are we becoming a culture that where you have to be fully optimized, you have to be the absolute best person you can be, and if you do this, you're not going to be operating at 150%. That's not what this is about. What it is about, and this is what I loved about our interview with Anna Donaghy a few weeks ago, is she said, just ask yourself that honest question: is this improving my life? Is it making my life better, or is it getting in the way? It's that simple. It's trash my life. Genuinely, if you can go out and have 2 or 3 glasses of wine and you can socialize, you can do whatever, or even go out the weekend and it's not impacting you, genuinely feel to yourself, this isn't something I'm concerned about, and that question's not coming up for you, then that's in my eyes, that's fine. I believe.
I
If you
don't.
can genuinely look at yourself in the mirror
But
and
you don't
ask that
know.
question.
You don't know if
You
you
don't know. You don't know.
if you've been drinking habitually your entire life, and I don't mean as an alcoholic, but just drinking what most people do, normal amounts, because most people drink relatively moderately. The average person, they might
Mm,
drink two, three times a week. Don't go out and get hammered, but they have a couple of glasses of wine or a couple of beers. See, I don't. I think it goes back to the sleep. I honestly think even if you're having a small amount, it's trashing your sleep, and that's the bit I think people miss, because
mm,
you're if you've only got your sleep for comparison. You can't go inside my body and compare how I sleep versus how you sleep. I mean, obviously we both sleep pretty well because we don't drink. But if you when I was drinking, I didn't think I wouldn't have said that I slept badly. I'd be like, sleep fine, thanks. It's
mm,
only when you've got the comparison that you can see, bloody hell, wow, I wasn't sleeping well at all, but I just
mm,
didn't. I didn't realize. So yeah, I just sort of think that people don't necessarily make the connection to what else is on offer when they stop drinking because they haven't got the comparison. They
mm,
haven't taken if you you don't recognize there's a problem until you have something to compare it against. And that's, I think, the revelation that people get is they just don't necessarily realize that, bloody hell, things could be so much better if I just took this break.
mm.
And you see it all the time with with clients. They're blown away by how different things are. Yeah, most of the people that I work with, I'm sure it's similar for you, are people that you're right. They don't want to come. That people don't. Yeah, people don't DM us saying I really want to optimize my health. They
No,
say
no.
I feel like I'm drinking too much. It's concerning me. It's stressing me out. I want to lose the anxiety. And they focus on the things they want to lose about drinking, like the
Yep.
poor health, maybe the weight gain, the lethargy, not showing up for their kids. And it's about losing these things that they don't want that are holding them back. But then after a week or two, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I had no idea I was going to feel this good. I had no idea, I have so much energy. It's so that all of a sudden they've got this window into a world they didn't really know was there. And
Mm,
that's kind of what I mean. So I think I agree with you when you sort of say that if it's not a problem for you, then it's fine. You crack on, but in a way, you don't really know what you're missing out on until you've tried it. I feel
no,
like I'm being a
no.
bit of an evangelist for it here, but so what happened with you after you'd kind of done that? Obviously, you did the Ironman. You felt great. Did you get to a point where you felt that maybe you were getting a little bit bored, or there was kind of like a gap left behind from alcohol, or was that not? Because I see that quite a lot.
I was certainly aware of more time. I was certainly aware of more time, and there were. It's different because I guess being a dad and being having 2 kids and being being busy with all of that. And there was lots going on in our lives. We were having like we had a quite, I was saying earlier, quite a big extension on the house. There was lots of other things going on. But in terms of, I naturally filled those gaps with my exercise. And I
Mm.
found the time to do those things. And that time around a busy life would often be 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, getting up super early
Yeah.
and having. So yes, I did fill those times. I did. I still kept going, not as often, but I didn't go to the pub that much anyway, I suppose. There's a lot of the drinking I did was probably at home and lighting the barbecue and, like you said in the past, watering the garden, those kind of things. And um, but I still kept going to the pub. I still kept doing the social things. I still kept all of that. I frequently meet with my brother every few weeks for go for a curry. So I kept on doing all those things and I just pushed through them. So I never
Mm.
felt that massive gap in my life where that had been taken away, and that may have been slightly different for me had I felt that. But I think it's really important once you get to those 2 or 3 months in to really look, and if those gaps are coming up for you, then that time is a great opportunity to fill and
Mm.
start to look at what
It,
what could I be doing differently here?
well, it dovetails into what you were saying earlier about once you feel like you've done something hard, you're a bit like, huh, what can I do next? And
Mm,
that's where I think if you've been drinking for 30 odd years, like we were, sometimes it can leave a bit of a gap and you're not really sure what to do next. It's all very well to say to people, well, we'll just find something else that lights you up. And it's like, yeah, well, how do I
mm,
find something else that lights me up? And
mm,
sometimes that takes quite a long time for people. And it definitely did for me. I think it was probably, I want to say almost it was beyond a year before I really started to find something that I wanted to do, which was this, yeah, funnily enough. But
mm.
I'd kind of filled that with, like I say, getting into nutrition and exercise and just going on this big kind of health journey that, was really kind of took my interest. But I do see it quite a lot with people that some people alcohol's holding them back from doing things that they really enjoy. Maybe that's playing golf or something like that. Perhaps they don't play golf as much as they'd like because they're hungover, and all of a sudden they can
Mm.
get back into it. If you've already got things in place, maybe that you've just don't do very much of, but you'd like to do more of, that's kind of a perfect scenario. But if you're somebody where going out drinking is your only kind of source of enjoyment, then that's where you have to, I think, really try and find things that can kind of fill that gap. Because if you just rip out the alcohol, just sit there with this bloody great big hole in your life, and that's where you get bored, and that's where it tends to sort of fall apart. I think, even if you've got something that you've got any kind of modicum of interest in, follow that. Go and take an art course maybe, or go and take up yoga or something like that. Because quite often it leads on to something else. Like I
Mm.
said earlier with the nutrition and stuff, and I was thinking about I was going to be like a nutritionalist. That led me on to okay, coaching out when I coach people to take a break from alcohol, and it kind of so one thing kind of led to another. But unless you try sort of new things and follow the thread, I think if you just sat there thinking, what am I going to do now? Don't go to the pub anymore. Don't drink anymore. That was the only thing I enjoyed. What am I going to do? That's going to get quite difficult, I think, because I think you've got to go out and try and get into new things.
I think you'll also, and for me, things come up that you forgot that you were into.
Yeah, exactly.
There's things that
Definitely.
come up for me. It's like, I
Guitar.
think, well, yeah, I've got to do. My son's get creeping away from me. But yeah, there was that. There was that aspect of picking up a guitar and learning the guitar, which I just thought, God, when am I ever going to do that at 52, 53 years of age? But there was, I know I come back to the running, but after I did my big event 18 months ago, I was recovering for 2 months. I just thought, what can I do here? You know what? Actually, I've just taken on something that only 150, 200 people in the country have actually done. So sod it. How much is it going to cost me to become an ultra marathon coach? Google that, found it, studied that, and then qualified as an ultra marathon coach.
Mm.
Um, things like Christmas and birthdays roll around, and I used to be really good at art at school. I never followed it up. I never did anything with it. But now I just make my kids' birthday cards. I make Joe's Christmas card. I find a design and I'll draw it, and it's just that little thing that just is, I think, is so much more received and has got thought behind it. And actually, it's quite rewarding sitting down and just and doing that. And I
Yeah,
find it,
definitely.
it's those little things like that. I mean, I'd love to read more. I'd love to read more. My time is full now with everything that we're doing,
Yeah.
but just picking up a book, sitting down, having a read, or just being comfortable in that space. But it came with time, and it's yeah, I've never been more comfortable, just kind of in my own skin, I suppose, and in
Yeah.
my own place.
Yeah, definitely. I think
Mm,
that's the danger of having all this extra energy is you've got to put it to good use, or
mm,
otherwise you're going to get quite frustrated. But I
yeah,
just think that kind of almost if you just follow your interests, I think that just you just fill that time anyway because you've got to do something with it. You can't just sit there and be like, what am I going to
yeah,
do? I'm bored because
yeah,
boredom is such a danger sign. I think with alcohol.
for sure, for
And
sure.
yeah, you said as well about taking a break in the summer rather than in January, which we've spoken a lot about lately. But being able to get outside and burn some energy, whether it's in nature or on a bike or running or walking or going to the beach or whatever. But I think being outside is such a gift. So
Mm,
it's only the 3rd of June now. So if you are thinking about taking a break, now's the perfect time because you've got 3 months of summer ahead of you. So
yeah,
even if you've got a
yeah,
summer holiday coming up, just rip the band-aid off and just jump straight in. What's
yeah.
the worst that can happen? Booze is still going to be there, right? if you
Exactly,
don't, if
exactly that,
you don't like,
exactly that.
if you don't like it, I had a guy comment on just as a little side point. I did put a reel out last week, which was usual kind of stuff, talking about how great life is when you don't drink. And some guy commented on there that um, he's got loads of friends that stop drinking and they look dead behind the eyes and they're constantly miserable and and he put something like no amount of tree hugging is going to change that because I've seen all my videos of me walking around the forest and I just replied back saying is that what they've told you or is that your perception of the situation because I thought so here's the thing this is a little bit of a con but you sort of say to people how many people have you ever met before who've quit drinking who don't absolutely love it because
Yeah.
it's a bit of a it's a little bit of a loaded question because if they didn't love it they would have gone back to drinking so they wouldn't be alcohol
Yeah,
free
very true, very true.
anymore but I just thought I don't know why I've brought that up it just made me laugh he's just
Well,
said
it
that
sounds like maybe, judging by the fact that he's got all this time to make comments, negative comments to other people on social media, maybe the conversation that he has with his friends is the reason why his friends are so dead behind
exactly
the eyes.
yeah exactly yeah that's I think that
Sorry
probably
if
is
you're
it
listening. We just lost a
yeah
listener, but you weren't welcome
I'm
anyway.
pretty
But
sure he was. I'm pretty sure he wasn't. It wasn't
no,
listening.
I'm
I
sure.
just
I'm
found it quite
sure.
interesting because no one's ever said that before. Like, yeah, all of my friends who quit drinking hate
But I
life.
see it exactly. I've
Really?
never,
No,
no.
I don't think so, mate. I
Yeah,
don't. I don't
I've
think.
met people that have tried before and they've fallen back into it because maybe, like you said, they haven't focused on those things. They haven't really sat back and looked at those things. And in the shorter time, that's why people do fall back into it. But I have never, never, never yet once met anyone that's done 3 months and regretted it, even if they've gone back to drinking moderately.
No,
I've never met
100%.
anyone
How could you? How
that's
could you
regretted it.
possibly regret it?
No.
How could you regret it? What was there to regret? Like I say,
Yeah.
even if after 3 months you don't like it, which again, not met. I don't think anyone who didn't like it after if it's done right. I think if you're doing it in terms of restricting yourself and fear of missing out and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, you are going to find it quite miserable. But if you do
Mm,
it from a position of curiosity and I wonder how good this could be for me,
mm,
it's just that entire perspective shift just changes everything. And
hmm.
yeah, even if people do go back to it after 3 months, they don't go back to it in the same way that they did when they started. If
No.
it's about getting control back, then 3 months, 100 days will pretty much do that.
So that sounds like a pretty decent place to wrap up. But I was just popping into my head that this time next week we will be putting out episode number 52, which will mean that we have done 1 year solidly every week of the pod. And I think it would be a great opportunity next year to have a bit of a recap of the year to date and see how
Next
it's
week.
gone. Yeah,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, hundred
Yeah,
percent.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't believe it because we haven't missed a single week. I'm just
no,
so proud of us because I remember
yeah,
when we first sat down at Penny Hill and we talked about doing this. You
yeah,
said it's all about consistency with podcasting. You've got to just keep showing up, and we have not
yeah,
missed a single week in a full year, and I am
exactly,
so proud of us.
exactly.
Even like when we've been on holiday, or you've been on holiday, I've been on holiday, we've still covered the gaps. I remember that time. When would it have been? I think it would have been around Christmas where we did about 5 episodes in a week. We recorded 5 episodes a week just to keep it going.
Yeah,
And
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And we've
it's
taken it from
amazing.
2 listeners to 6, and
Oh,
that's
we got
success.
another one. All right, it was only 5 last week. Are
It's awesome.
you
It's awesome.
counting? Are
So
you counting Joe and Chris in that,
yeah,
or
exactly. That
the
was the
wives
two, and
count?
now we've
Oh
got an
right,
extra
okay,
4.
brilliant,
Only joking. Only joking. So yeah,
incredible.
look forward to catching up next week for our
Yeah, good
first
stuff, mate.
birthday.
Have a good
Awesome.
one.
Have a
Take
great
care.
week. Take
See
care.
you later.
Bye.
Bye.